Okay, video. Alright.
Yeah, can you just make sure I'm visible in the camera real quick?
Make sure what?
I'm visible in the camera.
You got your chin and your eye. It's up to your eyes.
Okay. There.
If you lean over into the table, I'll get you.
This.
Pull your. My good God, we were 13 shoe?
12. Alright. There.
Yeah, as long as you stay leaned over. It cuts you off like right on here.
Alright, that's fine. I know you're the focus. Okay. So, my mare, say hello to the camera.
Hi, camera. Harry's boy. I'm his grandmom, but we call him Hap.
Alright. Now, can you just introduce yourself for the camera, please?
I'm Joanne Crossan Murray.
Alright, so, when were you born?
I was born July 5th, a delayed firecracker, 1935. That makes me 83.
Very young, very young. Spring goose.
Yeah,
Alright, so here we're going to be talking about the country just during the Vietnam War. Oops.
Oh, God.
It's fine. It landed on his back. It was already cracked. Don't worry. The other way around to the camera.
Like this.
Yeah, that's good.
No, that's not. If you want to be able to see it.
There we go. Okay, there. Now after that unfortunate incident, let's avoid touching the table. So obviously the country was very different place during the 60s and 70s.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
So first, when you think of the 60s and 70s in America, what's the very first thing you think of? What it's like at the time?
My life was centered around having a large family, mainly because I was a young girl with a lot of kids.
Yeah, can you say how many you had?
I had 11 children in 13 years. And on top of it, I had 6 boys.
So what was that like?
I loved every one of them because they were handsome and strong. Never wanted to lose any of them.
So before anything about Vietnam, what do you say you have ever heard of the country before we went to war there?
No, I never heard of Vietnam. The only thing that was ever present on my mind was World War II. I knew a lot of stuff about World War II because I was in grammar school.
Well, yeah. Well, before we get into Vietnam, your existing perception of war? What was it like? What is your opinions when you think of World War II?
When I think of war, I think of the horrors that and the propaganda that I realized as years went on. But when I think of World War II, I think of horror and Hitler.
Yeah. So moving on. Now, before anything about Vietnam, what do you think is the single biggest part of the culture that existed prior to Vietnam that just isn't there anymore?
Truly, I never was concerned about Vietnam with raising a big family. The children were my main concern. And I can go further into it that when I did hear of Vietnam, I didn't want to be involved with it because I didn't want any of my children being involved in war.
Can you say how old your oldest child was at that time at the beginning of the war?
He was about 17, I would guess. He was born in 1954.
Now, when you first heard that we were going to war across the globe in Vietnam, what was your first thought?
Never wanting to be at war because of the Second World War, the impression and the memories that left me with. That was my main thing. I didn't know anything about, never heard of Vietnam before it happened.
So you would say you were very anti-war. You were against sending troops.
I am because of Hitler.
So that has persisted throughout your entire life. You would say that hasn't really changed ever?
No, my feeling is the same. It's very strong, very strong. War is wrong.
Thank you. So going into the war, what do you remember the attitudes being, not just of yourself, but of the rest of the country going into the war? Do you remember like?
I think there would be many mixed feelings, mixed opinions of all people, and that's what makes people free to feel whatever they want and vote on, and their reasons for wanting war. And that's why we need good government.
Do you remember what the news and the media was like going to the war?
Scary. Scary. Very, very scary. And, you know, when things did come up about it, I would just be thankful that my boys were not involved in any of this.
Do you think you perceive any biases in any of the media at the time?
I don't recall, you know, any of that. When you're a mother of such a large family, your main concerns are your children, and I'm being repetitive. You know, I don't want them involved in war.
So, do you have any one specific memory, not just of the attitudes of the time, but one specific moment you remember that defines that time of history during the war?
Which war are you speaking?
Well, Vietnam.
Vietnam. No, I really can't say other than the feeling of when it ended.
So, what was it like when the war ended?
Happiness. Happiness. People's feeling where I think thank God this is over. Thank God this is over with. Not the same as World War II. I didn't have that feeling because there was much cheering. I don't think there was as much cheering as what we saw with World War II, because World War II lasted too long.
Yeah. So, about when all the soldiers came home from Vietnam, do you not remember what it was like when the soldiers came home?
I think when the soldiers came home, they had a feeling that they did good for their country and they did this and that and the benefits that they got. But when you think of the benefits they got and the missing limbs and the tragedies that they had to carry, that they're memories of what they, you know, had to carry for the rest of their lives. I didn't know, you know, many of the guys, but those that I heard about and those that I knew were glad to be home.
Now, just beyond America, just speaking from your own mind, what do you think it was like in Vietnam for the Vietnamese?
I have no idea what it was like, but I would think that they would share the same feelings as we had, that glad that it was over with, because men make wars.
So you're saying your overall opinion was just that you were happy no matter what that the war was gone.
War is over with. War is not good for anybody. No good for anybody. Mothers lose their sons.
Now, what do you think of the prominent opposition to the war at the time, the protesters and stuff?
I think some people like to protest. They like to be involved. They like to have something to say. They like to feel they are the conquerors. And that's not what it's all about. That's not what it's all about. There's reasons for it, and I'd like to see more women involved in government, and maybe we wouldn't have all this stuff.
Now, what do you think it was like with the politics in America at the time of the war? Do you remember what it was like in the elections that occurred during the war?
I don't really recall, you know, any of the above. I wish I did know more, being of the age of knowing things and not recalling all. And the only excuse I can make is that I wasn't all that involved, other than my feelings.
Do you remember what it was like with the presidency of Nixon and all that? He was still a controversial figure nowadays.
I guess my opinion would be the same as the majority of people. Need I say more?
No. So during the war and all, do you notice any differences in your personal, just how difficult it was to go through everyday life during the war? Did things get harder at all?
Some things, you know, are always harder, whether your way of living, your vacations, buying houses, but purchasing car, all of those things change when you have war. You are limited as to what you can do, and that's what people don't like. They like their way of life. They don't like the interference and the strain, what they have to deal with.
So, what would you say? Now, at the time, what were your thoughts on the draft that was going on for the war?
I was thankful. I was very thankful when people would ask me, and this is what I mean, my limitations on this. What would you think, Mrs. Murray? And I said, I'll move to Canada. I don't want my boys dead or their bodies harmed in any way, whether it's in their mind or their losing of limbs. No, I was against all this. As a child, all that I saw, it brought back memories, and I thought, no, I don't want war. I don't want me losing my boys or other women losing theirs. That's why I am truly, truly against any war at all.
What do you think the single biggest change in the country was that was brought by the war?
I think people will think a whole lot more, and if they're of my generation, most of them will agree with me, because Vietnam was the same, where they make things advantageous to boys that came out. You can buy a house, you can go to college, you can do this. Is it worth it when you don't have your legs, or you don't have a clear mind because of all the sights and horrors that you saw?
Going back, is there anything you wish you had done at the time?
I wish I had been more involved to give my thoughts in a clearer way, other than my main interest was my children. My children. I knew that, it would never hit home with me in the U.S., but other people would be affected, where they lived. It wouldn't affect me. I'd move to Canada.
Now, I'll talk about a few specific events and see if you remember that are related to war. Do you remember the Kent State shooting?
That's very vague, very vague.
When the National Guard went onto that college campus against the protesters.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that?
I recall that, yes, but not in full detail, no.
Do you just remember just the general, what your thoughts were when you heard about it?
Yeah, when we think of any kids being involved and what the protesting, and goes on in their mind, I like children to be free of all this kind of,
Yeah.
It's not right. It definitely is not right. Not.
All right. Do you remember the original the resolution we used to go to war? That's on the news, the Gulf of Tonkin thing, when they said one of our boats got bombed.
No, I can't say. I recall that. I'm not, as I said, the perfect person. I had friends, believe me, I had friends that would be far better interviewed than I, can give to you, because they weren't in my spot. They weren't in my shoes, with and argue with me and joke with me about my becoming a Canadian, right? It was a way out for me.
Do you remember when that large assault happened, the Tet Offensive, when our forces, when it was during the end of the war, when it was a very large offensive that sort of showed how just, precarious and exposed the forces were in the Tet Offensive?
No, I don't. I truly.
Well,
as I said, if I had some of my old acquaintances, if they were alive or around, they could, but. And it's a long time ago, for me to be bringing that. Maybe my grandson should be interviewing one of my daughters, or one of the boys. Sorry about that.
All right. Do you remember controversy over various activities that went on during the war, such as Agent Orange and stuff?
Yes, I do. Agent Orange. Yes, I do.
So, what do you remember about Agent Orange?
Agent Orange was Agent Orange. I don't know what in the name of God Angel, but I certainly That rings a bell up here.
It was what they used to essentially destroy the forest cover.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
it was very, very bad. It was like a carcinogen, I believe, or a toxic.
Toxic, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, what do you think about just when we heard we were dropping all that all over the place?
It's wrong. It's wrong. All of this stuff, we're put on this earth for different reasons. And as I can't express it strongly enough, that war is wrong, no matter what the name of it was. Civil War, Revolution, whatever war it was, they were all wrong.
How do you feel about the war in Vietnam in comparison with other wars that have occurred since then, like the war in Iraq or Afghanistan?
I think they were worse.
Well, this may not be exactly the point of the interview, but it's interesting. What do you think about those wars?
I think they're worse because they want to be better than the, in a way they want it to be a better war than Vietnam. They want more things and they look for more reasons. So now that this is over and that's what will be the reasons for the next war and what will they label that?
Well, there's obviously tensions going on nowadays
Yes.
with the Iran.
Yes,
their oil
uh-huh.
tanker.
And that upset me very much. And I said to my children, I'm fearful with this Iran. And they say, don't worry, Mom, it won't be a war. Nobody can promise me that.
So I guess you'll be purchasing my tickets to Canada then?
You'll be right under my armpit, boy. You know, should anything happen. No, it's, you can't take the sons away from the mothers.
Now, back to the war. Do you remember when Watergate first broke out? What were your first thoughts as it went on?
To me, it was a way of using TV, discussing everything on TV, more newspapers out with Watergate, and all of the people inquiring how could they find out more information to read about all this Watergate stuff. And I thought, you know, nobody's reading a good book, nobody's doing that. They all want to know all of the details about Watergate.
Do you remember not just Nixon, but the other major politicians at the time, such as McGovern's campaign, who was the opposition to Nixon in the election?
To me, it's all politicking. It's all in politicking. You know, I'll sell myself. You know, vote for me, and blah blah blah. It's I mean, I had many in the family that wanted to get as much information as they could to make everything understandable. Read this, read that, and it's. I just thought of it as, in all truth, it's not healthy for the mind. But you should know what in the name of God's going on. You should know. You should know. But to be so involved that you had to read the latest on this, and it's the same, you know, today. TV. Where would TV be today if they didn't have all of what's going on now? Where would TV be? I'll ask you the question, right?
Not making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say there's ever been anything that challenged your perception that was so important and groundbreaking that you thought, maybe I do really need to read about this?
I really do need what?
Like, you're talking about how, like, the TV is always, like, oversaturated and talking way too much. But have you ever seen anything in your life that was so major that you thought, maybe this needs so much coverage?
People should know the facts, but the facts most of the time are so exaggerated, or on purpose they're eliminated and not telling you the entire truth. So it's half a dozen of this and a half a dozen of that. So you have to form your own opinions on this. How do you know that this is the entire story, or is this all for politicking? You know, I don't know. they one politician is knocking the other for votes and so on. So it's a sad time in this, and we all should know what's going on, but do we know if we're hearing the truth?
Also, now I realize I'm sort of like going back and forth to the war and then back.
Go ahead.
But in the war, do you remember when the war sort of expanded outside of Vietnam, when we started very heavily bombing other countries other than Vietnam?
I recall that, and I think, why? Why?
Now,
What was the point of that?
the government officially said that the Viet Cong were like using supply lines through neighboring countries. Did you believe that?
No. No. I don't, with the government, whether I'm safer being a United States citizen than maybe Canada has other things. I jokingly use that expression with Canada, but you are safer in the U.S. You are safer in the U.S. It's a sad. It has been for quite some time a sad time. A sad time for all. And I don't like saying that, but it is. We'd all like to have a happy pill.
Now, you're talking about how the media just keeps on lying, telling more than the truth. Just in your own words, in your own opinion, what do you think was the reason that America went to war in Vietnam?
Because of men and their discrepancies on this and seeing that, irritating different countries. I remember now, just presently, and you're talking Vietnam, but I remember it surfaced in me that as a young girl, I remember being taught in school that tariffs cause war. And now, not with Vietnam, it wasn't tariffs, but right now. So there's many different